Welcome to the Liberty Lobbyist, where we teach you political lessons from the purple state of New Hampshire so you can advocate for liberty no matter where you live. I'm Melissa Blasek. I'm a former New Hampshire state representative, and I am the current executive director and lobbyist for a grassroots organization called Rebuild NH. I am not going to do a long monologue today because I have a stellar, spectacular interview with the great Daniel Horowitz of the Conservative Review podcast on The Blaze. He is one of the most intelligent voices of political analysis and is truly outcome-based in how he thinks. And we are going to talk about the issues that matter, when they matter, and what we're going to do about them in state legislatures. A lot of people don't know this, but you can go to your state rep or your state senator and ask them to put a bill in for you. They actually love to do that because then they feel like they've locked in some votes with constituents. So they absolutely love doing it if they even slightly agree with the bill idea. This is also the time to do it. There are blue states that operate year-round, but for the most part, the vast majority of states only are in session a few months out of the year. And it tends to be in the fall, maybe into the early winter, that they are allowed to submit legislation. They can't just submit legislation whenever they want in any state, just like they can in Congress. Again, some blue states are different, but for the most part, most states, very narrow bill submission periods. New Hampshire is right after the election in November. And I mean right after. I believe it starts the next day and it only goes for 10 days. And that is it for the rest of the year and the following year. So it's very important that you get your timing right. I can't tell you how often I would get people with bill ideas, constituents come to me in January when the legislative season was starting. I would say it's too late. You're a couple months too late. So summer is an amazing time to be brainstorming and crafting legislation. All right, we're going to bring on Daniel Horowitz here. He is a true American patriot. A lot of people don't know, but he does so much work behind the scenes that he never asked for credit for. And I'm just very appreciative to him for all of his work and his friendship over the years. Before we get going, I'm going to have a word from our sponsor, Native Path. Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a plump, hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of collagen in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut without the need for unnecessary fillers. Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety, which is so important for me because I have stopped using other collagen brands because of the heavy metal concerns. Completely flavorless, the Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, oatmeals. I don't like protein shakes or smoothies, but I put it in my coffee every single morning. I put it in muffins. You can put it in oatmeal. It's awesome. Its peptide formula makes it more bioavailable, meaning it's absorbed more easily and mixes perfectly without clumping. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals. You get 3 or 6 packs at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a trusted choice. Plus, they offer an 800 number with a person there to answer any questions about usage, recipes, ingredients. Join their private Facebook community to share success stories, recipes, and support each other on this journey called life. Get Native Path. Visit getnativepath.com/dailyclout and get started on your transformation today. That is getnativepath.com/DAILYCLOUT. And a new sponsor that we have today. Are you tired of struggling to keep up with legislation? This is very appropriate for my show that impacts your business and daily life. American citizens are often kept in the dark about live legislation that could directly affect them. That's where legislature comes in to put live U.S. state and federal legislation at everyone's fingertips. Legisector is a revolutionary tool that changes how we engage with legislation. It addresses the problems with existing legislative databases, which are notoriously hard to search and understand. Lobbyists and professional organizations have long had a stranglehold on actionable legislative information, but Legisector changes the game. Legisector solves this by pre-populating users' portals with live bills matched to their needs. No intermediaries are required, and the bills are served up in an accessible format. Plus, state-of-the-art AI technology summarizes even the longest bills into easy-to-read paragraphs. That's super important. These bills get long. Why is this important now? In 2023, federal lobbying hit $4.26 billion with nearly 13,000 lobbyists, and the spend per year has been growing every year since 2016. And yet 330 million Americans don't have access to what the lobbying industry does. Legisector is here to change that. Whether you work in healthcare, finance, real estate, cannabis, or any other industry impacted by legislation, Legisector is your go-to solution. For just $49.99 per month, you can sign up for your industry of choice, receive notifications, follow trends, contact bill sponsors directly, and get AI-generated summaries that make dense bill text easy to understand. Visit legisector.com today to learn more and stay up to date on the issues that matter to you. All right, let's bring on Daniel Horowitz of the Conservative Review. Welcome to the Liberty Lobbyist. Daniel Horowitz, host of the CR Conservative Review podcast on The Blaze. Thanks for being here, Daniel.
Hey, Melissa, if only we could pipe in that cool air from New Hampshire here. I'd be in business here, but
it's
otherwise
in the 70s today.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I gotta move there one of these days.
We would love to have you in the free state. Okay. So Daniel, you are always talking about that we have to fight the issues that matter in the way they matter and at the time that they matter. So today I want to talk about what are the issues that matter and how do we fight them in state legislatures. Obviously, we do not have many tools to affect change in Congress, but we do have opportunities in state legislatures, and it's summer. And at least here in New Hampshire, this is the time when they are crafting legislation. And this is the time that if you are a voter at home, that you should be contacting your state reps, your state senators, if you have bill ideas. So we are going to brainstorm. Daniel is a one-man think tank. He does significantly better work than any think tank I can think of. So let's start off with this, Daniel. And I actually have a pad of paper and a pencil, and I'm going to take notes of this, okay? So you're going to tell me what are the issues that matter, and then we are going to go through and we are going to brainstorm solutions.
You thought you'd get away with that a filibuster, but I got to filibuster that first. I got to preface that, before we get to the specific issues, but sure. As you well know, being in the New Hampshire House, you were a legislator, and you understand that the sessions are lightning quick. In most states, you have a limited period of time where you could even introduce a bill, much less get a hearing on it and shepherd it through committee. So now really is that time where we need to be thinking of, regardless of who wins nationally, what do we need to do to build those sandbags, to erect those barriers that we don't have the San Francisco, Minneapolis dynamic in some of the states that you reside, particularly in New Hampshire, but really, large swaths of the country, at least half the country. How do we erect those sandbags to make sure this stuff doesn't seep in? And I just want to say that there's 110 conservative organizations that were signed on to Project 2025. Okay, most prominently Heritage Foundation, but that's a lot of muscle. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of personnel. It's a lot of resources. And I'm thinking, wow, for a movement that, I think we've all critiqued is devoid of substance, there's a lot of potential there. So now that Trump, sort of defecated on it, it is what it is. I'm not relitigating that, but what we could do with it, it would serve everyone well if they took those resources and had a red state Project 2025. Okay, so, we're all trying to struggle. Let's say best case scenario, Trump had brain surgery and he became a different person and he won the election. He was amazing. All this stuff. Still, I mean, you'd have Mike Johnson as speaker. You'd have Mitch McConnell, mini-me, shepherding a 51-seat, Senate majority there, where it's very limited as to what they would be able to do, would be willing to do. But just to set the pace here, because a lot of people are saying everything hangs in the balance. But what I'm here to tell you is, if we got our act together and marshaled those resources from all those organizations, a transition plan, that's kind of what it was. Well,
right.
What's the transition plan for new incoming Republican governors, incoming legislatures? What they did in Project 2025, it wasn't so much a platform as a transition plan of, okay, this is the Federal Trade Commission, this is CDC, this is, State Department. Here are going to be the issues that are going to be confronting you right away, and here are the immediate changes you need to be making. This is the sort of thing we need at a state level, and states have different agencies and different rules. New Hampshire, where you are, has many quirks that are probably different than any other state, but largely they follow the same structure,
right.
Very broadly. And we should be working on that now, because what I have found in my experience dealing with legislatures, and I know you've lived this, is that often when we come up short, it's because we were late to the game. We caught momentum really late, but then by then the session was waning. And unlike Congress, which is kind of always there, you have to wait until next year, and then you got to start over again. So I think just in terms of, we talk about the time it matters, if you want to succeed in January with an agenda saving red states economically, socially, and demographically, in terms of security and illegal immigration, all the top issues that people care about, now is the time that you need to be crafting the what, the how, who are going to be your people running those bills. And then, to the extent we can, and there aren't many Republican governors we could work with that are kind of Republican, but at the executive level, that's the same thing that Project 2025 was trying to do. That was actually all really executive. It wasn't so much a list of bills or ideas to pass Congress. We need an idea of what do we do with, the departments of child welfare, whatever they're called, health, education, things like that. We need to start building that plan. And I think there's a lot of division on the right, and I don't mean to filibuster, but I think this is important. There's a lot of needless division right now on the right, but this is something that should unify us, because no matter what happens, we need to be doing this. So obviously, if Harris wins, it's pretty obvious that we need, oh my gosh, we need to build levees. You need to build a wall around us, that when you come in with your energy regs, your finance regs, your healthcare regs, all that stuff, you're, inviting in even more illegal aliens. You need a structure in place to say, not here, okay?
Right.
Not in New Hampshire, not in Florida, not in Texas. We need a structure in place to be doing that, and that needs to start now, okay? You can't do that on the fly when you have 90-day sessions, 60-day sessions, some states 34-day sessions in South Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have that structure in place. If Trump wins, again, in some ways it's going to be more of a challenge, because then all of the focus is going to want to be federally.
The politics is going to be different, but the results are not going to be different.
The results are not going to be different because look, the bottom line is, and this is one of the issues we do need to discuss. You might have a little bit less or a lot less of a problem with DOJ persecutions and that sort of component of interposition that we need to build in the states, making states sovereign, interpose against the feds. But I think we all could understand that, illegal immigration, and we'll tease out some of the key issues that I think we know. Illegal immigration, there's 5,000 ICE ERO agents. Those are your deportation forces. There's no way they're going to get out. We have millions of illegal aliens that have already been targeted by ICE for deportation, 7.2 million. And history has shown that 70 to 80% already have a criminal record aside from being here illegally. With 5,000 ERO agents, even if Trump beefs it up to 6,000, you're not going to get that done. States have to, hopefully in the case of Trump, would be contributing and complementing rather than interposing. But nonetheless, you have to do that. Economically, I think we know. I mean, again, even if Trump were a fiscal conservative, which he's obviously not, there is not a shred that they will cut. Inflation's going nowhere.
Right.
Nothing. I mean, if anything, all of their plans, whether it's
it was all
tax
big
cuts, more military spending, they want to expand child tax credits, and whatever you think of them, the bottom line is they will result in more deficit spending, therefore more treasury auctions needed to offload and service that debt, therefore more money printing, therefore more inflation. So it's a great talking point that Biden inflation and Biden sucks and the economy was better under Trump. That's a great talking point, but prospectively, I think
between political slogans, right, and campaign slogans,
and if you want to win that election, that's great. But privately, let's not lie to each other that because of what was put into place with the COVID stuff, there is no way, frankly, even a conservative president, I think, would be able to do anything. How do states evacuate themselves?
Yes.
So these are the sort of discussions we need to have. And again, I'm going to tease out a third. So economy, we have obviously the spending, we have immigration, we have green energy. And this is, I want to talk about this more, but we already have 18 Republican House members. Remember, that's the more conservative body. And there's a lot more that weren't signed on, but publicly have said they will absolutely not repeal the Green New Deal. Now, as we well know, the Green New Deal is a force multiplying issue of deficit spending, of market distortions, of dystopia destroying our energy and facilitating, you will own nothing, live in 15-minute cities and eat bugs and be happy. That is something that cannot stand.
Right.
I am here to tell you, okay, even if Trump would fight with all of his might, and again, I'm a little bit suspicious of that. In other words, he'll be pro-drilling, but will he fight to end the green energy subsidies? That's the key.
That
That's
I've
the
not
mother's
heard
milk.
about.
That I want to get to. There's a lot that can be done in the state. So the overarching, and I know that took 10 minutes, but I just wanted to give the imperative and the opportunity we have to start building in the states. Trump has collected hundreds of millions of dollars to run this campaign. What he's doing with it, we'll kind of find out, but a lot of that is largely out of our hands.
Yes.
So, you only get one vote. But with activism, you get to vote every day. With activism, when you're in a small state like New Hampshire, as you well know, you get a group of a few dozen people on the ground. You're, rebuild New Hampshire. And every day you could say, hey, that play call into the ears of the quarterback, into his earpiece. There's a play down the field. And that's the earlier we do this, the more success we'll have.
Absolutely. And like we were saying, this is the time of year to be planning for next year. I will be having actually a meeting, a little get together with some of our sort of star legislators to discuss these issues, to make the plans. New Hampshire is a slightly maybe earlier time period, but a lot of people don't realize very narrow bill submission periods, especially in red states. There are some blue states that are kind of like year round, the way Congress Act works, but really red states are very narrow windows. Know your window so that you can get to your legislator. So let's get going here. So economy, immigration, green energy, which kind of goes with both, but what other of like overarching topics do you think are the major issues of the moment?
So again, I mean, obviously you look at the existential threats to our society.
Yep.
And I think, and it's not, I'm not naming them necessarily in order, but I'm talking about issues that are, each one is a compound force multiplier for a civilization. So, illegal immigration, it's demographics, it is healthcare spending, it's the schools, it is culture. Okay, it is crime. I mean, and I think this is important because a lot of people in New Hampshire might think crime's an issue that's very uneven. So some states, it's become a very big issue. Other states, it's still kind of like the last 20, 30 years. It's, since the 90s hasn't been such a big issue. New Hampshire might be one of the latter, but
it's one of the only ones that's probably not an issue.
But the difference is that's when you're dealing with, inherent American, urban, suburban, rural dynamic demographic mix of where crime resides. But the thing about illegals, yes, in sheer numbers, they go the most to places like New York City, Chicago, LA. But the reality is they're going everywhere. They're going to all four corners of this country. So you're going to bring in a lot of things that are not inherent. And particularly this Tren de Aragua Venezuelan gang that is bringing a very particularly brazen sort of violent crime where they don't even fear police. They don't fear much of anything. So the point is, illegal immigration is really, it might not be as big in New Hampshire as others, but the sheer numbers we brought in, it's affecting all 50 states. So that's one. Obviously, civilization, that needs to be stopped. Cost of living. I mean, venture socialism. Okay, that we don't have a free economy. Again, I mean, this is not just a talking point. This cannot be allowed to go on. Right now, we are at a point where you have to, you have a family with a couple kids. You have to earn an unusual amount of income to live the standard of living of your parents and grandparents. Okay, that is a reality. What are we going to do about that? You have the green energy grift, like we talked about. It's not just a grift. It's not just wasteful spending, contributing to inflation, but it is literally the kind of like the scorpion on the frog's back. If you allow the subsidization of, if you allow insolvent forms of energy to keep afloat solvently, making us insolvent, right? Meaning enough that they could keep going, but it's not like it's going to work for us in a cheap and effective way. You could drill and have an all of the above approach, like all these retarded Republican governors that are embracing all this stuff, but you will have this, you are hitching that ride. You erect the EV, solar, wind, carbon capture, the four axis of evil there in red states, which is exactly where they're doing it. We're screwed. That needs to be shut down. So we'll go through each one. Obviously, so that's 4. Medical freedom, 5. That's not going away. There's a lot of unfinished business to do in terms of
going along with that needs to be, how do we take back red state health departments? That is a huge part of the puzzle. Like, obviously, this is one of my main issues. I am fighting a department in a red state put in there by a Republican governor, and they are communists. I mean, there's really no other way to say it. So,
indistinguishable from what you'd find in a blue state.
Exactly. New Hampshire's health department is exactly the same as California, which is exactly the same as Alabama. There is really no difference between a purple and a red and a blue state on that level. So that is definitely something. And so one of my main missions has been to reduce their power at all costs. I may not be in charge of appointing, say, the commissioner of the health department, okay, but I can have the legislature remove their power. So I think that's one of them.
No question about it. And then 6 and 7 is individual liberty and culture. So let's do 6, individual liberty. Unlike some of my colleagues, so I actually believe my talking points. So I do believe that, and this is one thing that I think is going to be more profound if Harris does win, that we need to prepare for, that it certainly is a likelihood, or at least 50-50, they will be very emboldened to step on the gas pedal of just arresting political opponents. I mean, this is something that really, until the last couple of years, is something that we never would have entertained. Yes, we're profligate. Yes, we're licentious as a country. Yes, we're kind of corrupt, but we all had freedom. Like, you're not going to lock up political opponents. This is this is a real problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is something. So, again, I want to go back all 7. Hopefully, if we have time to retrofit them with specifics, but I want to get the outline. And then culture. I mean, look, obviously I'm, particularly religious person. I'm a big social conservative. But even if you're more kind of secular libertarian, wherever you are, what is going on now is not the lack of social conservatism. What is going on now is something that is unnatural and demonic. So when you have, and you've seen me before, point out this Gallup survey that 28.5% of Gen Z females identify as something that is in one of their alphabet things that will not result in procreation.
Right.
I'm not saying procreation is the only problem with that, but the gender confusion is that
societal problem, though.
Now, again, a lot of this is culturally, but we have an obligation. I mean, this is something that when you control state government, you can't remain neutral on that. Now, we could all say, I want to abolish public schools, and that's nice. But as long as you're going to have state public schools in red states, which we do and kind of will, you need to steer it where you don't tell me like, oh, we're going to have hands off. Hands off. You could do what you want. No. It has to be very clear, very clear. Every state needs to extirpate and uproot, deracinate every semblance of gender ideology in every aspect of state government, starting in the schools, but in the libraries as well. Again, you want to have your private stash of porn. You got your private stash of porn. A library is, don't get all fake libertarian on me. If we have it and fund it at a state and county level, then you have it, and you can't have this sort of stuff in there.
Sure.
And it's that every state needs a bill ending drag shows. Every state needs a bill prohibiting castration. I don't understand it. In no other aspect of healthcare do we not have regulations. Like, you can't chop someone's hand off. So how do you chop their breast or balls off? Like, I don't. That's more systemic. I mean, I hate to be crude, but that. I mean, it's that stark. I mean, it's if there's no like cancer that you have to do a mastectomy or something like that, I mean, you can't do that. You it's not just a matter of taxpayer funding, like funded through Medicaid. That's a no-brainer, but that needs to be regulated. In other words, even if you're more kind of a laissez-faire person, there are, I mean, in every other context, we regulate that, and you can't do malicious destruction. Okay, you just can't do that.
Yeah.
And you can't set things on fire. So even for our libertarian listeners, that needs to be stopped right away.
It's a time when uncertainty looms at every point around us, and it's essential to be prepared. Being prepared is not just advisable, it's really critical. And that's where the Wellness Company's medical emergency kit comes in that we're proud to support. Imagine having the reassurance that you're fully equipped to manage any medical emergency, whether it's as commonplace as tick bites or as daunting as the challenges posed by the latest disease of the month. The Wellness Company's medical emergency kit contains vital medications such as ivermectin, emergency antibiotics such as amoxicillin, antivirals, Z-Pak, and more. It's the ultimate solution for being prepared for whatever may be coming up. Rest assured, this kit has been very carefully crafted by the Wellness Company's team of distinguished medical professionals, which include Dr. Peter McCullough, Dr. James Thorpe, Dr. Harvey Risch, Dr. Drew Pinsky, and other dedicated, truth-seeking doctors who are all among my personal pantheons of heroes of this time. With their expertise, they've set the gold standard for safety and prevention, Don't wait till the next crisis catches you off guard. Take your health and your family's health seriously today. So click on the link below or head to dailyclouthealth.com to purchase their products. Please use the code DailyClout for 10% off. It's time to find those alternative healthcare communities that actually do care about your future.
Obviously, you know, connected to this is we need wholesale, this is its own issue, but wholesale reform of child protective services in a given state. One of the problems is that, you know, people that have a kid that gets roped into this social contagion, that starts to become a factor in parenting, and that needs to go by the wayside.
And there are bills all over the country, and people should be aware of this. And I was fighting this, I fought this all year in New Hampshire, where they're trying to put language into child abuse statutes that say that if you don't meet the unique needs of your child.
Yes.
That unique needs is this term, and apparently we're not the only state that they tried to put this into. I did kill that, but there's that. We also, they were trying to say that if you, number one, everyone should be fighting against needs testing to be a parent, okay? They're always trying to make parenting tests. Okay.
Yeah.
The reality is, if you are abusing your child, that's illegal. Fine. If you are neglecting your child, that's illegal. That's fine. But you do not and should not ever have to prove that you are a fit parent if you have not broken the law.
And I would say this is the child protective services is a type of issue. There are certain things that we have ironclad principles with. Then there's other issues that you do have to understand. It's a balance, and it's a balance that you have to understand the era you're living with. And are you closer to you know, drifting into this goalpost, this guardrail, or the other guardrail? And that obviously, you know, there are protections that are needed. It is a very serious thing if you determine a child is being abused, and it's a very, you know, it's something that you have to have that there. But in the era we live in, where we are so polarized as a people that the people that live differently, we believe you're abusing your child, right? If you're, you know, we believe if you're masking your child, that's child abuse. They believe if you're not, that's child. But you see what I mean? Yes. Like, we're so divided that you can have that weaponized, and particularly the education and healthcare professions are saturated with those, you know, sort of Karens that believe in that stuff, and they're weaponizing that against parents. Obviously, you had that in New Hampshire, but you have that in many states. So
it's everywhere. Yeah.
And I don't have the statistics in front of it. It's in my book, Stolen Sovereignty. You know, and I actually did a you know, interview with one of your colleagues for the book.
Yeah.
That you know had the state go after him.
Rise of the Fourth Reich, and yes, so J.R. Hole, the case is over. So J.R. Hole is was actually the founder of Rebuild NH, and he also runs a firearms group as well. And so yes, he they wanted to take away his, I think he was 12 or 13 at the time, year old son, because he gave him ivermectin.
Yep.
And that was a year-long battle, and, you know, tens of thousands of dollars later for them to say, oh yeah, no, I guess that's not abuse. But it was horrifying and traumatic, and it was absolutely politicized beyond belief. There was actually a video on TikTok that went viral of a woman sitting in an ER. So you're talking about the medical industry. Woman sitting in the ER saying, I don't know who this JR guy is, but if you're watching this, do not come to a hospital, because they are saying that if you show up or your kid shows up, they are taking your kid, and it's because you're a gun nut. Because they Google it.
Yeah. This is a big, so that's what I'm saying. Like, because I'm very sensitive to, there is a problem with really bad people, and it's, but
that's in criminal behavior.
But in the era we live in, okay, in the era we live in, the statistics speak for themselves. I think I found only 7% of initial inquiries wind up resulting in a determination that there is child abuse. And that's a problem, because that shows that it's too zealous on the other side. And particularly, so there's two levels. There's before due process. So like, taking away, and then the severity of what you do after you make the determination. The second level I'm more amenable to. I mean, if you went through all the due process and you determine whatever, and you want to come in, all guns a-blazing is one thing, but particularly on the due process itself is really where we need to work on.
Absolutely.
Because the
That's
biggest
really
problem
the only path here. They have to have proper due process, and you still have to be innocent until proven guilty. So we had a bill in New Hampshire where they were trying to remove that by saying that, let's say CPS knocked on your door and, you say to them, listen, you can come back when you have a warrant. By saying that would be grounds to lose your parental rights. By demanding your due process. Again, we got that killed. But
it's more comprehensive than that, Melissa. It's the problem is, and I think this is the way to sort of express it. The risk of losing your kid in a child custody case is viewed by most state laws as a family court issue. So it doesn't come with the accoutrements of due process, evidentiary standards, how you present your defense, the timeline, just everything. The judge could do whatever he wants, even though the severity of result for most people, it's worse than going to prison. For example, if you're on the hook for 6 months in prison, so you have full due process to erect a defense against that before they come in and punish you. Most people would rather go to prison for a few months than lose their kid. And that's so again, that's something I think we really need. It's needed in most states from what I could see to varying degrees. So that needs to be on the bucket list. Do you want to move on?
Let's move on. So we kind of went through cultures and schools and then CPS issue in more detail. Let's kind of go back through. So and talk about some. All right. So let's go back to the economy. So although that kind of does go with your cost of living one as well. But let's start with the economy, just generally speaking. What is it something this state could do?
Okay. So this is something I've been obviously dealing with a lot this week. It is rapidly becoming my number one issue for all, and this is equally uniform in every single state, because it's not like crime or immigration or some of the social issues. The economy is the toughest thing, because you could erect this levy around a state for culture, social issues, legal structure, whether it's healthcare laws and education and obviously immigration and crime and all that stuff. Economy is tough. We're one economy. We're all together, and the feds have a monopoly on the printing presses, and they're bankrupting us. And so you could run, for example, but let's take Florida. Florida they have paid down a third of their outstanding debt while lowering taxes across the board multiple times. And it's real great. There's a lot of economic growth. There's a lot of prosperity there. But at the end of the day, they're just as steeped in the cost of living problem. I mean, they have it even worse because they have such an unnatural pull of people want to move there. But it's not like it's cheaper. Like, how do you solve inflation? And the best idea I have seen, and it's rapidly becoming my number one, because it's not just inflation, it's freedom, it's everything. It will pull. If God came to me and gave me one wish to be granted legislatively, it would be creating functional transactional gold and silver currency in the states. And I want to explain how this is going a level beyond the typical what we've said in the past. Let's make gold and silver legal tender, which I think 8 or so states have done. But the question is, how do you legally, politically, and functionally in the digital society, digital transactions we have nowadays, how do you jumpstart a gold and silver economy for currency that will single-handedly, it's not a switch, it's going to be a ramp, it would be over time, totally pull the rug out from the Federal Reserve, meaning we're never going to repeal it. We're never going to have the votes to cut a dime of spending. This is the one thing we can do. And there's a lot of different bills. I want to point you to transactionalgold.com, and there's a bunch of bills there. The one I know is there's a bunch of similar ones. Iowa SF Senate File 2108 from the 2023 session, but it's in about half the states, and basically what it will do is direct the state to create a gold-backed savings and checking account. So to purchase enough to have a initial bullion depository, and then allow people to open up checking and savings accounts where consumers can pay vendors with a debit card. So you won't have a credit card, but nowadays you barely earn anything off of credit cards anyway. The 1% cash back you get is not worth it for what you'll see we get. And then that account is backed by gold. So I open a checking account with $20,000. I could have some or all or a portion backed by gold. And by the way, Kevin believes, and I agree with him, it should be silver as well. You want to have it a little balanced because of the volatility that will take place in the transition. So you want a little bit of a hedge. And you could have, so you get the benefits of an investment, but currency as well. So it's almost like an investment because, had you invested in gold the last 15 months, you'd be up 20%. So imagine, you get 1% cash back on credit cards, but here you could pay, you pay, if the restaurant's like, I'm not taking gold. Mm-hmm. So first you have to make gold and silver legal currency. So only like 8 states have done that. So every state needs to do that. But then you have to make it functional currency. So it's essentially no different from the way we use dollars now. We don't, for the most of our transactions now, we don't exchange dollars. It's digital. Okay. Right. It's digital. So it's detracted from your account. So he could get his digital dollar that the vendor always gets. You could get paid your income that way too. And it goes and it's against your shares of gold. So what we all know we need to return to a gold standard. Federally, it will never happen. Now, usually it's like, oh, great. States can't do this. States can't. We wish we could do this, but you'd have to violate, the supremacy clause. This is the most radically transitional thing that we can do that is black and white in the Constitution, because the Constitution wanted to make it that states can't coin their own currency, like have their own dollars. Right. So Article 1, Section 10 says states must not yada yada create the currency other than gold and silver. So it's right there. Okay. So you make it currency, and under the IRS's current rules, even if they wanted to change the rule, the Supreme Court precedent would be up against them. If a state recognizes something as a functional currency, and gold and silver they're constitutionally allowed to do, there's 2 Supreme Court rulings backing that. Wow. Guess what? It can't be taxed. See, because right now the problem is, oh, great, you earned 20% this year in gold, just like your stock portfolio, now pay a tax on that. That will undermine its ability to be a currency. Here, it's kind of like an investment, but it's currency. It cannot be taxed. But states need to do that. Again, I don't want to spend the whole time on this, but transactionalgold.com, Kevin Freeman, he has a show at the Blaze like myself, and he really has all his heart and soul in it. It's not like one of these gold companies that want to sell you a product. Right. His whole thing is working with legislators to get the states in on it. And, one of the ideas is for the revenue to have a fee. So for the state to, again, whatever bank you use, it's not the state's going to take over the bank. Right. The state offers to back it for you. So you have whatever bank account, your local bank could do whatever they want or not do, but the state would charge, let's say, 0.5% surcharge, 0.5%. Look, historically, if you believe what everyone on the right believes, that we are checkmate economically, you got to believe over time, again, there is a little degree of volatility. People have asked, what happens if 70 million Trump voters would do this at once? Yeah, but it's not going to happen at once. It's more of a ramp. So the market will adjust to the price. Kevin has produced, and again, this SF 2108, there's 30 other bills similar to it. That one's only gold. I believe we need to do gold and silver together. I have not seen a better, more practical idea. I could say abolish the Federal Reserve. We don't have the votes, never will. I could say we go back to gold standard. Federally, it's never going to happen. I could say, oh, let's go personally invest in my bullions. But how do you practically, in today's economy, it's almost like the principle of Bitcoin a little bit, but jujitsuing it into gold. So that's the long and short of it.
I want to be clear. It's just very practical here. So if you're in a state and you think, hey, this sounds like a great idea, and you get a legislator who agrees that it's a great idea, you're probably just politically going to want to, well, first of all, you do need to legalize it as a currency first. And if that's already done, or if it hasn't, doesn't matter. You're probably going to want to put in a bill to make a study committee first. You have to get legislators used to concepts that are totally outside of their wheelhouse, right? This is one that will be totally outside of their wheelhouse. If you throw in a bill to legalize, to just do it, they're all going to say, whoa, 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 that's not possible. Okay.
And then you'll have the fiscal note that you'll have there. Well, it will cost.
Fiscal note, everyone will panic about it. So I really recommend starting with the study commission bill on this. Again, major ideas like this take multiple years. Let's move on. Immigration.
And just one more thing. I'm just saying,
go for it.
It's headed there anyway. China and Russia and the BRICS nations are stocking up on, they see this play down the field. So the same thing they're doing to the feds, red states need to do back to them.
Yeah.
I don't see any other way. Okay. I could promise you at a federal level, no matter who wins the election, that I could prove it to you, we will not cut a dime of spending.
Yep.
None of this. And it's not just spending. Everything we hate about government is built off the printing presses. Yeah. This is the only thing I have seen that is practical, and it has built in it a ramp that by definition is not a switch. By definition, it has a walking before running stage, because it's something that would have a take up. It's a voluntary, it would start off voluntarily. So pay as you go, you want it. There's going to be a state fee on it to fund it, but you don't have to do it. People could take a wait and see approach. Anyway, that is something the sooner, getting back to how we started the show, the sooner you embark on the process, you never pass something that transformational in 1 year's legislative session. The sooner you embark, like this passed the Iowa subcommittee, judiciary, I think maybe judiciary subcommittee, not the full committee. Next session, maybe we'll get it past one chamber.
Yep.
You got to start.
No, that's exactly how these things go. I mean, just a few years ago, it would have been shocking. 20 years ago, it would have been shocking to have a state pass a nullification bill, right? And now it's so common that the Speaker of the House in New Hampshire sponsored one that passed like 2 years ago. So again,
that's number 8. That needs to be there too. A nullification bill that, any federal government edict, executive, legislative, or judicial, that the state legislature, you could, however you want to structure it, executive committee, you could do attorney general, different ways of doing that you determine is unconstitutional. You have a vote, and it has the effect of banning its implementation by state officials, local officials, or state-funded NGOs.
Yes, blanket across the board. So a lot of states have started with 2A ones, right? And that's, listen, everyone's going to start someplace, but we are looking into doing that here, and so I think it's a great idea for other states, just saying like anything that's unconstitutional,
healthcare in particular.
Right, exactly. All right, let's move on. So immigration, states. What can states do about immigration?
Sure. Again, look, this one you're going to have to deal with the courts, but the more courts are political, and the more states do it, and the more emphatically so. There's power in numbers, and, I could tell you the Republican appointees on the Supreme Court, it's all public. It's all perception of how strongly they think we're going to fight it.
Yep.
You know, it's all political.
They have
It's all a game.
Yeah.
The bottom line is we need, you know, things like, I have it here somewhere. Oklahoma HB 4156. Now, this is actually the law now, but the governor is just not going to enforce it. So a lot of this is really an enforcement issue, but creates the crime of impermissible occupation. You cannot be in the state illegally. You cannot be in the state if you did not enter the whole of the union on a valid visa. And it criminalizes the actual residing in the state illegally. And now I think we need to build towards states having a state-based alliance repatriating aliens on themselves. The Florida governor DeSantis has said this numerous times. He said it personally on my show, that if he had other governors to work with, he would have what he called a state-based return to Mexico policy. But short of that is you leverage criminal penalties against voluntary repatriation. And we're starting to see some bills, and this is one of them. So you're like, you know, if you're caught, so certainly if you're committing another crime and we see you're here illegally, it's subject to enhancements. So here's the deal. You could spend a year in the slammer, or you could get the hell out of here.
Yep.
And now that might only be the state. So if you want to go to California, you're welcome to go there. But again, you're not going to solve it federally, but if we could get them out of here, that's fine. You need to cut off bennies. We need to start challenging Plyler v. Doe and education, healthcare, all of this stuff. Either you believe in it or not. Like there's this kind of thing that every Republican's like, oh my gosh, it's terrible. And then, here are some bennies. I mean, you got to cut off all state bennies, and every state is recognizing them in some way while saying they're here illegally. So, I mean, you have to make it very clear that it is known by the smugglers and the cartels. You don't want to land there. Your destination is going to be a blue state.
Yeah.
It's a matter of incentives. I know in your state, some aren't going to like employment enforcement, putting it on there, but at least begin with the government. And, you know, just, they're not in the shadows. We know where they are. It's a joke. We don't enforce it. States need to enforce. That is a simple reality. So that's an easy one for me. Okay. Again, HB 4156. Another one, if you want to get a little bit more spicy, is Oklahoma. Nathan Dahm, who is the state senator, he's also the party chair. He has, you have to look up 2022 session, SB 1226. It would basically try to solve birthright citizenship at a state level, and again, direct hospitals not to automatically give out birth certificates to any living organism that just happens to land there. That, you know, they have to have valid documentation that they're here legally, that they're at least a legal permanent resident. You know, you don't have to be a citizen. The parents don't have to be a citizen, but at least a legal immigrant, that you're not either on this birth tourism with the tourism visas, or you're just totally here illegally. Again, the courts are going to screw with a lot of what we do, and that's a whole nother discussion, but you got to get on the playing field. Yeah, exactly. All right, green energy, the green energy grift. I got to tell you, so we're dealing with this in New Hampshire right now. It's become a real hot election topic because they want to put all the wind stuff off the coast. So, and the coast is freaking out. So yeah, go ahead. New Hampshire is obviously much smaller than a typical red state, but this issue really gets me because it's one of the most important issues. Again, it's a force multiplier. Energy is the freedom, great set. Prosperity. It's everything. This is, you want to talk about the next COVID, the shutdown of food, energy, land use. I mean, this is everything. And on paper, like any leaning anything all agrees. Like everyone understands this problem. But then in reality, the Republicans, the only difference is they want all the green grift, but you could also drill. But the problem is, if the government is giving renewable energy portfolio mandates, so you mandate it, you monopolize the public square to say you have to have it, because we're dying of global warming. You have, and then like, according to Goldman Sachs, when all is said and done, the Green New Deal IRA bill will wind up having 1.2 trillion in subsidies. You can't compete with that. So, the bottom line is this is a gift from God if we had a sane party. Oh my gosh, Daniel, we don't have the votes. The Democrats did it, and maybe we won't have the votes to repeal it. And here's the deal. Republicans originally stymied Obamacare by refusing to enact Medicaid expansion after they won, the Supreme Court case on that.
Yeah.
And, the Burwell case. The reality is that this is 100 times better, because all this crap, these EV plants, and certainly the wind and solar and carbon capture, it requires a tremendous amount of land, which in itself is very anti-environment, by the way.
Very.
Which states have land? Tim Walz is in the news. He famously said that rural Minnesota, his state, they're full of rocks and cows. Now, they're right. They're right that most of the people live in urban areas. But here's one thing we need to realize. If we only asserted our control over the Republican Party, we control like 80 to 85% of the landmass of the country. Certainly if you had all the red counties within blue states, but even just red states, that's where all the land is. And you look, Bloomberg has an article out. The meccas of the EV grift are Georgia, South Carolina. The carbon capture and wind and solar grift is in the Great Plains and the Midwest. Iowa, Nebraska, the Dakotas, Wyoming. I mean, the state legislatures need to shut it down completely. Okay. And it needs to be made very clear that, so first of all, no state could have renewable energy portfolio. I mean, straight up a left-wing mandate, but there are still a handful of red states that have it, which is shocking. West Virginia, I know, has it. I think Utah has it. So that needs to go away. Obviously, they need to reject all IRA funding. You can't be two-faced. Okay. Oh, I want to create jobs. That's not job creation. Then let's just spend a quadrillion amount of dollars and dig ditches and create it. Loses jobs in the long run. When you unnaturally give tailwinds to things like EVs that even with them are failing, even with the subsidies, you know what you get? The doubling of auto insurance like we have right now, even for gas-powered cars, because these companies have to cover just if a car is in a wreck, it's an EV, done. It's done. It's totaled. Right?
This is your basic, anytime the government starts, this is venture socialism, right? So anytime the government goes in there and starts tipping, putting their hands on the side of the scale, it will always end up with unintended consequences, and it always spirals out of control. And
we reject all IRA grants. But in fact, the governors, except for DeSantis, and I don't want to, I'm thinking now, I really do think it's except for him, because even a couple others that are halfway decent. I mean, this is something, and remember, when we're talking about legislatures, bulwarks in red states, the albatross around our neck is the corporate grift. And I hate to sound crude. I say it on my show, but it's needed to be said. We have a mentality among Republicans that we need to change, that Kamala Harris could become president and erect concentration camps for political opponents, and these bastards will clamor for the contracts so they can create jobs in their stupid states. And that mindset, that is immoral. It is, in the long run, it is counterintuitive, and it's got to stop. It's got to stop.
Completely agree.
This is the reason, right? And you got to be willing to stop jumping at every short. And look, here's the bottom line. If you have a state like New Hampshire, where you have a good regulatory climate, not this sort of like picking winners and losers things, and like special grants for carbon capture and special grants for this, but here's the good news. These SOBs have no choice but to come to our states anyway, because they've lost control over the security the crime, and then the taxation. These other states are spiraling. So Chevron just moved to Texas from California. That's the dirty little secret. We have them anyway. You don't have to pander to them either fiscally or socially.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
I mean, the whole
you're
thing
totally
is a joke.
right. I never thought about it like that, but you're absolutely correct. All right, let's move on just for the sake of time. So, crime. This is obviously a huge issue in most states.
Crime. The biggest problem we have with crime is, you know, and I know you have a big libertarian following audience, so, you know, some people agree, disagree on different statutes, different things. But I think, you know, anyone who's sane agrees that violent criminals, people that really are habitual robbers and carjackers, and, you know, again, like this melees you're seeing in San Francisco and places like that, but they're in major cities and red states all over. I mean, places like Houston and Austin and San Antonio are awful.
Yep.
You're having this even in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. The flash mobs
is a huge issue. And I actually will say, this is interesting because New Hampshire is like the libertarian homeland, right?
Yeah.
When I was in the legislature, there was actually a bill introduced that I didn't even, it failed, and it was to change us to be like the rest of the states. We were, I think they said, the last remaining state that if you are guilty of a violent crime, you are not eligible for parole, period. You must serve your full sentence.
Yeah, and Tennessee did that recently because again, the leniencies are built into the system. It's a long discussion. They're built in by a mile. You should be getting that full sentence. I think number one, we need we need real 3 strikes and you're out. So, you know, most states have something on the books, but it's a joke. It's you could drive a truck through all the holes. It needs to be really clear that if you have 3, any version of 3 violent convictions, you're a lifer. I mean, I think that is a no-brainer. And then juvies, okay, like juvenile. Look, you know, you could say you want to go more lenient on certain drug crimes, maybe certain petty theft or whatever. But Reagan's Commission on Crime said this in 1981, and it's true today. It's truer today than ever. Right now, and because of the cultural problems that we have an insane degree of a culture of violence getting younger and younger. And most of the carjackings that's, you know, taking place, armed carjackings and a lot of violent crime, they're people under 18, yet they're treated like nothing. Reagan's commission said it is no solace to the victim of a rape or a aggravated assault,
right?
That, the victim was under 18. I mean, I saw this case of this habitual, you know, criminal at 17. I once wrote about that grabbed a woman in Georgia, and Georgia's Atlanta's a cesspool. Their urban areas are awful. You know, grabbed this woman in a park and raped her and just she survived, but really rearranged her. And, you know, I was looking at that and like, I think we all agree whatever punishment you should get, which personally I believe like an aggravated rape like that, I think should get the death penalty. But if that's outside the Overton window, certainly life without parole. Whatever you believe for an adult, the fact that you're 17 or 16 should not make a difference. Our juvenile laws are too lenient. We need to restore deterrent. Parole and probation is a joke too. Everyone's like, we need second chances, but then they have second, third, and fourth, and they violate it, and then it's not reinforced. Like, well, Daniel, violating your parole is a low-level crime. Yeah, but the underlying crime was not low-level, so fine, you get out, but if you violate it, most of the crimes being committed are parole violations, people that, you know, whenever you see these egregious stories, these just terrible, terrible crimes, you look back and it's the same story. It's the guy, I could almost write his rap sheet. It's the same thing. And they keep getting out. They keep, you know, we got to do better on this. Frankly, even in the peak of incarceration, we were never doing enough. You know, we're focusing a lot on BS crimes, but on real crimes, the criminal defense industry has just taken due process to a level, you know, at a time that we're infringing upon it where it's needed, but we take it to a level that we all know in 1789, you commit a murder, you commit an aggravated assault, and just, these flash mobs that beat people to a pulp. We know what they would do in 1789. They would have a trial, they would have due process, but it wouldn't take very long to mete out justice.
Yeah. No, I agree. Okay. So cost of living, is there anything that a state can actually do about the cost of living? It's so funny. 22, every political consultant said the same thing. Every Republican political consultant said, you run on inflation. In my neighborhoods, we had big signs that said, fight inflation, vote Republican. And the reality is that we all then would sit around and say, what is it that a state rep can do about it? Right. So do you think that there is anything that you can do at the state level about the cost of living?
It's currency. I mean, it's all a matter of the currency. Like I said previously, I will say what needs to be done is New Hampshire is a small state with states that have a lot of energy. A lot of them are doing it to themselves. And, by going along with the green grift, they need to find ways to get around the feds with energy regulations. I think it's a matter of food, housing, and energy regulations that legislators need to get together and audit. Like, let's take housing. Housing is something that I think there's juice to squeeze out of that. Why does it cost so much more money to build a crappy house now than it did a while ago? So now everything's a lot of money. So the materials cost more. That is true. Yes. But I think you and I both know there's a lot of green grift and needless regulatory climates. How much of that is state? How much of it is federal? And how much of it that's federal can we say, screw you? And we're just not doing that. And food for sure with independent farmers. Things like, I know there's a whole debate over unpasteurized milk, that needs to be dealt with at a federal level. I think that I don't have concrete. You
can deal with that at the state level, though. You can fully,
but there are some things I think with agriculture, with housing, to a certain extent with energy that we need to look at.
I do think that there are definitely we actually have a lot of legislators in New Hampshire who are really looking into the food issue in particular, especially to connect. There's so much regulation that disconnects the farmer from the store, and makes it so much more expensive. So I do think that you can definitely work on that.
And Melissa, this also just ties into in general, why it's important with our game plan to have off-season legislatures, meaning, it's a thankless job. They often get paid very little. They have to have other jobs, which is obvious. But if we're going to make this work, you need to have you need to build a shadow government where, so you have committee work, look, if you have a good chamber, which is very rare that leadership is good. I know you have the New Hampshire House that fits the bill, where you do committee work all year round. If you don't, if they're a bunch of establishment jerks, then you have, your 10, 20 conservatives, you have your own shadow government with, your judiciary, your healthcare, your education, and you have off-season pressure, because you talked about how to deal with these Department of Education people, Department of Health people. They should be known by name to voters, just like we'd run against a legislator. That John Doe in the health department is doing this. This guy in the education department is doing this. This is what legislators need to work with outside conservative groups all year round to say the governor and his admin and names are doing this. They should be doing this. So again, this is something that, you don't have to wait for a legislative session. This is all 12 months of the year. The legislators need to use their prestige, their platform, their name, do media, write letter, like have signed letters, do press conferences. Like, we're out of, it's like, they declared martial law during COVID. We're out of session. Like, that's bullcrap. That's bullcrap.
I want to add, every state is different. You should definitely look into how does the legislature get called into special session. And I can tell you, this is something, if we ever get a good Republican majority, I am changing the Constitution, because it's very easy for the governor to call them into session, super easy. It is practically impossible for them to call themselves back into special session. And COVID was a great example. Why did they want to call themselves back into special session? To check the governor. He was never going to call them back into special session. Now, we didn't mandate in law that he had to during states of emergency, but that should be just a thing. It needs to be pretty easy for your legislature to call themselves into special session. And yes, you want to be paying attention. I talk about this a lot on the show. Administrative rule changes typically happen in the off season because they think no one is paying attention. And that is when all that little bits of tyranny come dripping in. So it doesn't, you don't need the legislature to do this. It just takes one person paying attention.
Also, the way, another thing that, you know, activists and legislators need to do off season is how federal dollars are spent and where. That needs to be tracked, because that's what creates this axis of grift with NGOs, with corporations that then drive certain policies.
So know how grant money gets accepted.
Yeah, again, and this ties into the so-called Inflation Reduction Act stuff, COVID funding. Like, I know in Florida, what they often did is they took like the crap funding and they spent it the way they wanted, and they were just like spent it on good things. Right. And that's what we need to do, because remember, you have the budget, but then they're just constantly getting streams of funding from the federal government, and that is driving policy. So that's certainly a big one.
Let's move on to so medical freedom. Do you have any wish list items for medical freedom?
Okay, so there's two layers to this. There's the messaging war of it, and then there's the implementation. So on messaging, there's an important messaging bill, but it's not just a messaging bill, it's very concrete. And you're going to have the number. I don't even have it with me here. I'm forgetting the number. Oh gosh.
Is this the WHO one?
No.
Oh, so, the one about the reporting.
So there was one in Louisiana and there was one in New Hampshire. The New Hampshire one, you know, John Bedouin was the one who inspired that, wrote that. But there's one in Louisiana as well. Where so let me just give a background. So other vaccines, we saw the Gallup polling that among Republicans, support for the child vaccination schedule has just plummeted, which is good, and we're getting there. But you know, almost every state, to the extent you can get them to do something on the COVID vaccines, there's no appetite to deal with with other vaccines. So you're going to have to build support for that. And I think we all know the way to break this debate wide open, which aside from the debate, it's something we all really need to know. We need to be able to do a statistical analysis on what, you know, when you have all the SIDS and the sudden infant death syndrome over the years and all these things, I mean, how much of it is from that and which ones? Right. So a bill that would require, when children die, to have on the death certificate, the medical examiner has to have the date and timing of various vaccines on the schedule that that kid has gotten. If we were to have that searchable information in a given year, you could do statistical analysis and begin proving whether there's there. And I think that sounds like a very kind of weird sort of bill. But if you ever want to defeat, because I mean, I think we do need bills to obviously have the state refuse to recognize the vaccine schedule. I think we need legislation to say very simply, if you did not have a legitimate long-term placebo-controlled trial, and a control group is defined by a group that had an inanimate sort of substance, not another vaccine, the state at least cannot recommend it, affirmatively recommend it. Listen. Because how do you disagree with that?
No, I know. I wish we could say right now, every single state in the country has vaccine mandates for school attendance. And I will say this was something I just didn't really think about that much before, but we ceded so much ground in the fight for liberty when we just all rolled over and accepted that. Okay. But all right. Right now, most people are just fighting to say that there can be blanket exemptions, like easy, I sign a piece of paper, I'm done. And absolutely, if you're not in a state like that, you should be fighting for that. The next layer, I think, is to say, and I'm going to have these two bills put in this year. Number one, that the state cannot mandate any vaccine that has not had a long-term placebo-controlled group trial with an inert placebo, and another bill to say that the state cannot mandate any vaccine that does not prevent transmission. And I think that that's really, those are,
yes,
the vast majority of legislators, even post-COVID, believe that all the rest of the vaccines are totally fine. If you would sit there and tell them, well, actually, they don't prevent transmission, or actually, they never used a placebo, they would have no idea. Oh, actually, they only tested for 5 days. They have no clue. So you have to start those topics. Another thing that I would really recommend, if you're every state in the country has a vaccine registry, and you should be going and at the least making your vaccine registry and opt in and prohibit any sharing of that data without explicit permission from the patient, and you prohibit any type of sharing with the federal government and other states.
Bingo. This is all good, and you're right. You have to have gradations.
Yes.
And anything, these are the ultimate things, and then you kind of see, all right, we'll parse it, these vaccines in this way, that way, mandate, recommend, take it off the market. I mean, I think by now we really should make a push that states should, under their consumer protection laws, prohibit the COVID shots. I really do think that the Overton window is there. That should be done. Liability, I like Louisiana HB 25 is a good liability bill for businesses. Look, you want to push shots, you want to mandate your employees get the shot. If it's safe and effective, then accept liability for it. So if we can't fix the manufacturer liability issue at a state level, we should at least put it on whoever, and certainly government, if any government, any county, school or whatever, or hospital, you should be on the hook for that. I think, emergency powers, obviously, most states, we still have not done enough.
No.
One bill I like is Tennessee HB 1615, that it basically requires legislative approval for executive orders that carry criminal penalties during an emergency.
Oh, I like that.
So Tennessee HB 1615, that's the thing. Anything, if you're gonna have an executive order during a time of an emergency that carries criminal penalties, that has to have not just we get into session. No. You cannot, you fundamentally cannot. I mean, that violates representative democracy at its foundation.
I love it. I also think we should be prohibiting any emergency order that does anything to change election law. I highly recommend that one. We're working on that here. All right. And then the last thing that we haven't talked about in a lot of detail from the list here is the weaponization of DOJ. Yes. What can states do?
This is, again, some of it's more naughty than others. Some of it is, you got to walk before you run. But this really is where interposition sanctuary comes into play. So blue states created a sanctuary, literally. I mean, we saw this during the Trump administration, where California, they would consistently, Chicago, shield sex offenders from ICE. So if they could do that, then we should be able to say, hey, if you have an American that prima facie did nothing wrong, and you have a law or a policy that violates the Constitution, takes away his rights, we're going to do everything at a state level to be with the guy. So let's try to pie the corner and start from the most achievable things and maybe move in. So there's the feds and there's blue states. Blue states is the easiest thing. So there is a trend now, the blue states are crazy, where they are, I mean, I use this example in Michigan. They basically have this law that, if there was out-of-state people that would email certain officials, you served in the legislature, you get emails all the time. You're crazy. Yep. I hope you die. But it's short of it's not a death threat, but just kind of nasty emails.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's the cost. That's the price of, you can't regulate that.
Yeah.
They have a bill that really, if a public official feels threatened, the determination of it is based on the alleged victim's own determination. It's very dangerous.
Sure.
They could come after you, and they extradited a guy from Massachusetts. And the thought, went to my mind. I was like, okay, wait a minute. If that's a red state, this is a trend. We need to make it very clear. We need to pass a law that any defendant that is being indicted in a out of state and they're asking for extradition, okay, could file an expedited motion with the state's attorney general to say either that they are prima facie being politically targeted, that they're, in other words, to prove that they are being targeted not for what they did, but for what they believe.
Right.
Or that the thing itself, the law itself that they're coming after them for is we determine is unconstitutional, that the attorney general could make an emergency determination. You can make a permanent one, a temporary one, almost like a judge, put a stay, either, maybe temporarily until I could determine, or I determined it's a problem. And the governor could not use have the state troopers cooperate. Because remember, this is before we get to the feds. This is easy. A state cannot come into another state and grab someone. Right. It's the state troopers of the
state in which he resides. Yeah.
Yeah. The state in which he resides delivers the guy to there. Sure. So, I mean, this came out with Trump when DeSantis said he would not deliver to NYPD. So that's a no-brainer. I mean, I think this is something we need to, because this is increasingly a problem that we need to have a sanctuary for people to run. Blue states are creating sanctuaries for people to run to get abortions, right? We need to do that. So, if you're like a pro-life activist, they come after you. Again, I mean, these are people that are letting out murderers and rapists. This is the anarcho-tyranny. This is something very important. We need, so I would just go down a couple of things I have here in my notes. Oklahoma Senate Bill 1199 allows sheriffs to arrest federal officers who attempt to confiscate guns. This one's a little bit harder, but it's something to think about striving for. Senate Bill 1200 in Oklahoma requires federal agents and officers to receive permission from the county sheriff before operating in the county. I think that's something that we could start with, at least that we know where you are. Yeah. Okay, we know, so we could start, having a little bit of a political air war against you if we don't like what you're doing. I think, as far as the feds, these people are left out alone. They can't even get attorneys. They're bankrupted. I believe, and, I understand everyone likes spending on green grift, except spending money on things that we have to, but it will cost money. But we need the attorneys general to have an office.
I was just talking about this with a friend of mine, actually, and here's the difference. The green energy grift is not about protecting your rights, okay? That's just about spending money, all right? Yeah. This is about protecting the rights. The only actual justification for taxation is the cost of the shared protection of your rights, because that is the primary purpose of government. So this is actually different.
Yeah. I mean, my guy, Steve Baker, my colleague, everyone knows that, like, he literally was reporting with his camera. The FBI told him for months, you did not, no problem. Yeah. And then when he started writing at the Blaze things they didn't like, they literally came after him years later. So that's prima facie. Everyone knows it's not the stepping into the thing beyond the metal detector. Everyone knows what that is. Okay. So we need where the Attorney General of Texas, you would have an office where, again, you could apply for, and if they determine you're being persecuted, they will help fund your legal defense. It helps materially, it helps emotionally, it helps in just politically. A lot of this is a political war. Remember, even if a state can't officially override, but if you have a bunch of them fighting back, it does make a difference. You have Steve Friend's bill, the FBI whistleblower. He has a bill, Tennessee SB 2804, where the sheriff or whoever the chief law enforcement officer is, police commissioner or sheriff, has to approve any of his officers working on JTTF with the FBI. What the FBI does now is, so domestic terrorism means you and me. What we are talking about this past hour, they define as domestic terrorism. So they go and privately will grab county deputies to work on, in Merrimack, New Hampshire, Melissa and her folks are working on this stuff. We need to do it. And the sheriff doesn't even know. The guy elected locally doesn't even know what the heck these guys are doing.
Yeah.
So the sheriff who is elected by the people needs to sign off on, they need to be aware of any of their deputy, what they are working on. Oh man, I have an ISIS cell. Let me look at it. If that makes sense, great, go do it. Okay. I was like, oh, but the FBI does good work. Well, let the sheriff determine that. But if we see it's like, oh, there's a bunch of Catholics that we don't like, that we think they're too religious, and they're going to school board meetings, then he'll be able to vet that out. I think that's a very achievable and important thing
I agree.
to do. We need a state ban on the use of public detention facilities for accepting FBI prisoners if we don't agree with what they're doing. This is what the blue states are doing with ICE. We need a state ban on government employee participation in FBI or DHS functions like recruiting events, FBI Citizens Academy, FBI National Academy. You got to fight back against them as a deterrent. A state ban on FBI recruiting events at public colleges. This is, look, if we really believe that we need to abolish the FBI, they're irremediably broken. This is a chapter out of the playbook of what the left does with the military, with ICE, and things like that. So, these are all different ways that I think we could interpose. I think we could get credentialing, that any federal agent with arresting power within the state, you need to register with the state so we know who you are. There's legislation in Florida. There was to go after like IRS targeting, that because they count on certain private vendors, that you couldn't work with them. We need state offices to start investigating this. Who in my state is the IRS, the ATF, the FBI going after for prima facie political reasons? In other words, be an ally. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
this is the problem. A lot of what goes on is a media messaging war, and they'll back down. I mean, at least as of now, before the real gulag comes out. So while we're still in a gray zone scale of conflict, to say like, oh, well, I can't, like yet arrest FBI agents, I want to get to the point where if need be, we would have the ability to do that. But there's a lot of things we can do, before then. And I think we mentioned a bunch of them.
All fantastic. As I knew that this would be, because you are truly a conservative think tank, and no one else is as creative and sees the entire picture. I can't deal with any of the conservative think tanks anymore. They get so bogged down in details that are so not important. Maybe were important 30 years ago. So I appreciate you, Daniel, and everybody out there. You should be listening to the Conservative Review podcast. It is political analysis that you won't hear any place else. Thank you so much for being on, Daniel.
Anytime. Good luck. Take care.
Thanks. That is it for today on The Liberty Lobbyist. I'm Melissa Blasek. You can find me at Melissa Blasek NH. You can also find me at Rebuild NH both on Twitter. And if you have any thoughts about this episode, email me director@rebuildnh.com. Until next time.